All right, welcome into another week of Served. JW here, producer Mike, Techie Sean. I didn't even say hi on the way in. I was rushed. Hi, Techie Sean.
Hey.
Okay, cool. Man of many words. We got some stuff. Paris Masters finishing, obviously, Alex Zverev winning the title there. It is a foregone conclusion that he will win if Sinner doesn't enter the tournament. Sinner takes off in Rome, and Zverev wins. Sinner takes off in Paris, and Zverev wins. If only Zverev could figure out a way to make him pull out of Australia.
Maybe Waterville?
No. That doesn't obviously mean anything. It's just coincidence, but fun to talk about. Anyways, Hugo Humbert, otherwise known as Hugo Humbert, because we don't pronounce H's. We should pronounce an H though, right? It's that thing with with Shebash Vuj, right?
I'm not getting in the mix on this.
You're not.
I can pronounce lever.
Here, but it's the old thing. Like when I would go to France, they would say Andy Roddick, and it was fine, right? But like if I'm talking about Hugo Humbert, I got to say Hugo Humbert, right? Great stuff. Paris Masters wraps up. Not a lot of movement in the race. To Turin, Rublev currently in that 9th spot, which in my opinion is it acts as the 8th spot because Novak Djokovic is not going to play Turin, I don't think. I also thought he would be a big ask for him to play Wimbledon and play well at Wimbledon. And what did he do? He just made the finals. But I am basing this before everyone gets super pissed at me even suggesting that he would skip Turin. 3 weeks ago, he said, I don't want to ever play that tournament again. And then he also is apparently in the Maldives. JW, I don't know in your experience, but you don't often see the old Maldives to Turin for year-end finals move. It's normally the Turin to the Maldives, right?
I like your DraftKings odds of knee surgery, Roland Garros, Wimbledon finals, or Maldives. I'm going to cut my vacation short and go play a year-end event that I've already sworn off. I would not expect to see Novak Djokovic, but you could go broke trying to predict the strange undulations of this guy. So I do think if you're the number 9 ranked player, you're feeling pretty good about your odds of making that main draw.
Yeah, and the number 9 spot right now is Andrey Rublev. And there's been a lot of talk this week. We talked about it on TC Live yesterday, which would be 2 days ago for those of you listening on a Tuesday. Let's break down, because I was asked a question on air by Weissman, and I didn't know, I wasn't convinced of how to respond. Basically, they show highlights of all the times where he is like hitting his knee with his racket super hard, right? And just for those at home who haven't beat themselves up with a racket, you strings versus skin, strings win when hit with force, right? And he has been open and talked about how, there's anxiety, there's this depression involved with being on tour. And then he said something which I think is worthy of a conversation, because you kind of have to thread a needle a lot of times in tennis. But he says, if I control everything, then I don't have that fire out there, right? I don't have that thing, that engine that makes me go, that thing where I'm motivated, I feel flat on the court. But then the other side of it is, it's like self-abuse at this point, right? I mean, he literally beats himself pretty hard. I mean, it's to the point of drawing blood most times. Where do you stand on this with Andrey Rublev, and are we concerned? The other point that before John goes is, we get in trouble if we break a racket, which is just an arbitrary thing, right? We break a racket, you get a warning. If you beat the crap out of yourself, no penalty.
Yeah.
Anyways.
I once asked someone about Nadal had all of these peculiarities and these tics, and says, call it whatever you want, right? His rituals. And I asked someone about it, and they said, well, I think one reason he does that is so much can happen in the course of a tennis match. Here's one thing that he can control, right? There's this feeling of you can control a situation. There are all these externalities, but if I arrange my water bottles just so, I'm imposing my will and my control. So that was a strange quote from Rublev. And I think that the fact that this is repeated, right? I mean, any one time we've seen it all. We saw with Francis, who was very out of character a few weeks ago. This is repeated. It's really excruciating to watch. I remember that they did a sort of a cutesy thing, and they played like the newlywed game with Medvedev and Rublev. And they sort of, how well do you guys know each other? You're friends from Russia from way back. And then it got really serious. And at one point they said, what do you wish Andrey would do differently? And Medvedev said, I wish he would like himself more. There's a lot going on here. I mean, this goes the first time he did this, right? It was sort of this funny YouTube pass around.
Yuzny did it back in the day and drew blood,
exactly.
And it was kind of funny. But this is getting to the point where it's not like I watch it and I don't think it's funny. And by the way, I need to just clear the deck here. I like Andrey Rublev a lot, and everyone in the locker room really likes him. He's one of the most liked guys on tour. Everyone likes his personality. He has a lot of levity, is self-deprecating. So this isn't as if we're like going after Rublev. It comes from a genuine place of concern.
Right. So let's talk sort of prescriptively. If Jalen Brunson of the Knicks, I don't know, I'm seeing his poster out of if he misses a jump shot and grabs the ball and throws it at his face and gives himself a bloody nose, right? The Knicks can intervene, the NBA can intervene, there's a players association, there's mechanism and process for how to address this. When you're an independent contractor, I'm not sure it's so easy. So everybody has sort of said, clearly there's a problem here. It's really uncomfortable to watch. I mean, there are all sorts of it impacts the match. There's a hygiene concern. I mean, it's not a good situation, but realistically, what can be done here? I mean, does the ATP have any sort of latitude to say, listen, we need some mandatory counseling? I don't think so. So I think this has gone from, look at the crazy tennis player who got so upset he made himself bleed to this is deeply uncomfortable. There's clearly a lot going on beneath the surface. What do we do about this? And I'm not sure I have much of an answer.
How about if you hit yourself, you get a warning?
Yeah,
I mean, can we have we're not hitting ourselves as an option? Because obviously, if you could break your racket on the deck, you would do that. But I just feel like breaking a racket on a court is a way lesser of evil than self-harm out there, right? I mean, in one way, shape, or form. Producer Mike.
I mean, for me, it's, at what point, like you said, right? Do you have to give them warnings? Do you have to penalize them for this? Because this behavior, it's being seen by younger players. It's being seen by, and I know not everybody wants to be a sports role model or should be required of that, but at some point it is a bit ridiculous, right? Like John was saying, if Justin Herbert's out there freaking out after he misses a pass, like he's going to be crucified on the morning shows. If this was an American event, this would be all over the media, and it's just kind of swept under the rug. But I don't think it should be. It shouldn't be sanitized for how ridiculous it is when you see it.
And I'm not mad at Rublev for doing it, because if you have to, obviously he has to go snap Fooey. I'm a hypocrite if I say, oh, you can't go snap Fooey on the court. I went uber snap Fooey, but I don't think I ever got to the place where I thought I was depressed, or I think all tennis players deal with a certain level of hyper anxiety. It's extremely isolating. I still, there were probably 4 matches in my career, maybe end of the year, where I wasn't nervous before a match, to the point where I was nervous before every match, where I felt like I couldn't eat food. But the 4 times where I was fine, you go out and you're flat and you can't play at all. You need that. You need some of that. You need some of that churn. You need, that's how you care about something. Anything you work on, Mike, if you go in and you're not obsessed with the result, it's going to be shitty. It just is. That's just the way it works. I said on TZ Live, I still have this association with certain foods that I would eat and try to get down, as you're waiting for a match and you're anxious, and all of a sudden a match you think is going to finish in 3 sets. So all of your focus, hydration, all of the food going in, you kind of had to try to thread the needle to, oh, this is ending after 3 sets. Then all of a sudden it goes 5 and it's 2.5 hours further. So you're trying to ingest the right amount of food and kind of play catch up, and it's imperfect, and you're constantly playing this game. And the only reason I say that is I still associate those foods with nerves. I eat them now and I get nervous.
Wow.
There's still that callback to those types of food that you would kind of just, for lack of a better term, just kind of like choke down because you needed what they were offering. You just didn't feel like actually eating. So there is a lot of that. But when I was nervous, it didn't necessarily mean that I played badly, right? Like I actually felt like if I was getting to the semis or finals of a slam, I normally played well. Like I didn't fear playing like a donkey. Whereas first and second round, if you're underserved or you're not playing a bunch going in, I would get really, really, really nervous in a bad way, right? So it wasn't so much, it was just kind of looking forward, but there were all these things where you're having to kind of thread the needle of emotions, and it seems like he goes in and it just spills over, right? And it seems like there's been a little bit more of a tail this year, right? Dubai happens when he goes snap phooey on the umpire, like, and it was, gets in their faces and goes nuts and it ends up being a massive story. And he was wrong about the call also, by the way. Yeah, something that is undersaid. But, at what point and how do you pull back or realize, or are there things that the tours can do to at least protect him from himself? If you swing a racket as hard as you can and you're, one of those guys at your knee, like that's an intent that you're going to feel that the next day, the next couple days. Like there's no doubt. So I guess the question is it the job of the tours to round up and figure out if there's any way to mitigate this behavior, or is it squarely on Rublev, JW?
I mean, I don't think they have standing to. I think somebody can informally tap him on the shoulder and say, look, we all like you. Clearly there's something going on here. We really need you to help yourself. But I don't think it's not as though they can mandatorily, there's not some sort of enforced counseling or anything like that. So, I think, too, the fact that everyone likes this guy, and this seems so out of character with how he presents otherwise. And everybody sort of plays amateur psychologist, and there was a long post. His mother apparently was quite an intense coach, and you say, oh, it's October and we're all burnt out and the season's too long. I mean, everybody sort of has their own explanation. I'm not sure how much help that is, but I do think this guy needs to know that there are a lot of people rooting for him, but also this is the problem, and it's at a minimum, it's deeply uncomfortable to watch. And yeah, if he were committing this level of violence at another human being, it wouldn't be a discussion. So maybe it's a little too arbitrary that we have self-harm versus harm to others.
Yeah, and again, we can't state it enough that Rublev is someone that everyone likes, respects on tour. It's not like has this behavior in the locker room. I mean, he is beloved on tour. But also the thing that's a little concerning is the frequency with which we see it. I feel like it used to be like everyone goes snap phooey, and there's going to be, everyone's going to get on the Twitter fingers and, have memes of me breaking rackets or something. And like, fine, I fully will lay on my own sword, or the thing with Baghdadis where he broke 6 rackets on court in it. But those are like, there's years between, when those things happen or how those things happen. And I think when it's directed at yourself as opposed to a piece of cement, it might be a little bit different. But I hope he qualifies for Turin. Everything's always a little bit more exciting when he's involved, and he has quite the streak. I don't know how long it is, but it seems like he's there every year. He's currently in the 9th position, which I consider the 8th position. And I can't wait for everyone to tell me that I'm a crazy person for that. But I don't know, maybe just a simple rule. You can't hit yourself. I don't know. They already have a rule where you can't break your own stuff. Like, it's my racket.
Yeah.
Why can't I break my own racket? I don't think it's much further to say, like, you can't hit your own self.
Yeah, right. And if you use an obscenity, right? If you curse yourself, if you have an obscenity and you curse yourself, it's still an audible obscenity, right?
Yes. Yep. Yeah. I mean, I feel like there's pretty simple precedent. Maybe I'm not giving it enough credit, but like, simply, you should not be able to take full swings at yourself while on court. And I think you could kind of back channel rationalize it by, hey, if there's blood, then a trainer has to come out and there's a whole thing. So in the spirit of time and yourself, we can't allow that. There seems to be a little bit more precedent where people are doing it more often. So maybe it's as simple as let's make a rule to protect our own a little bit. And that's that. JW, you were on Twitter earlier today talking a little bit about the women's finals in Saudi. And Great roster of players, first of all. Like, it's just been such a fun year on the WTA Tour. It doesn't seem like that is directly represented by attendance there in Saudi. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, you and I've talked about this. There's a lot of nuance and a lot of complexity here, and the money's good. I mean, you said the alternate. Did you say this right? The alternate is getting $250K.
I think that's what I heard on air. So if I'm wrong on that, it's not by much. It's six figures. Significant six figures.
But yeah, I mean, let's not be naive. There's a huge financial component to all of this, and it does not, however, seem as though the crowds are following. We knew from the start this is not about attendance and TV ratings and selling suites and sponsorships. This is about a country using sports to brand itself. We all knew that going in, and it seems as though everybody's kind of playing their role. The players have been asked about sports washing repeatedly, and they sort of stick to the talking points, and there hasn't really been any sort of controversy, which is probably in some ways a good thing, in other ways maybe a little disappointing. It does not seem as though the crowds are following, which is actually interesting to me because, first of all, there was a long lead time. And from the beginning, this has been a problem that's bedeviled this event for years and years and years. There was a long lead time, which you didn't necessarily have in Texas and in Guadalajara. So you would have thought there would have been some more grassroots efforts to sell tickets. But I had posted, there was a story that Matt Futterman wrote that said there was something like 400 fans. And then somebody wrote me on site and said, actually, it's more like 100. They're high school tennis matches that are playing in front of bigger crowds than Jesse Pagulia's Coco Gauff or Iga Swiatek playing, which is really disappointing. You'll notice on some of the TV coverage, you will not see those panning shots to the crowd. It did seem like attendance was really an issue with the Six Kings events. I mean, Mike, you know this better than I do. I mean, there have been boxing and UFC cards, and there have been other sporting events in Riyadh and in Saudi Arabia. It doesn't seem as though you had the sparse attendance like this, but the players are getting paid. The WTA's balance sheets are improving, but it doesn't seem as though this has really caught fire as a spectator event, which is awfully disappointing, not least given the fact that you've got really, really good players.
Producer Mike?
Well, I mean, if you think about it, right, this is a giant tourism board spend, essentially. Like, imagine if the city of Dallas, their tourism board was willing to put up this type of money to bring people in. The attendance they're hoping will come to events like this. They're trying to make this place the Las Vegas, of the world. And so I think they need to get events like this. And I think having these stars and actually having the event be exciting, I think is the first step. But for me, I don't know. I'd rather have the opportunity to go to Miami and actually see it in person. But that's not what their design is.
Yeah, and there's a lot of chatter on this Twitter with some, so well, then bring it back to Dallas because, they drew the same. And I'm going, well, that makes no sense. That makes no sense. Like, should the tours bear the brunt of financial stress just because no one's watching in a couple of places in person? I don't know. Should the players make less somewhere else? You can argue that they've earned this throughout the course of the year. And so if it's going to be a tough event, which it was a disaster in Cancun and it was a disaster in Fort Worth. So I don't know that I agree with the rationalization where, since it's a disaster as far as attendance, literally in one silo, since it's a disaster in attendance, it might as well be in Dallas. Like, there's a lot. Obviously, we're not talking about the money in that situation, and you're ignoring the reason why it is in Riyadh, right? I mean,
minor pushback on that.
Sure, all of it, major if you want.
Yeah, I mean, look, let's be honest. In sports today, tickets mean less than ever, right? It's about media rights. It's about the hospitality tent. I mean, the guy in the stands has never been less relevant to the economics of an event and therefore to the economics of something like the WTA. On the other hand, one of the great justifications when Chrissy and Martina were opposed to moving this event to Saudi Arabia, one of the great justifications by the WTA and some of the supporters were, we're inspiring, we're opening eyes, we're going to have all these this young population, girls in particular, they're going to be so inspired. When one of the justifications before this sort of moral dilemma was, oh, we're inspiring, we're going to introduce sports and powerful women to this country. And then you find out there are 100 people in the stands. That's a little problematic in a way that a sparse crowd in Dallas or Fort Worth or even Guadalajara is not.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I agree with that. And if Cancun and or Dallas had anywhere close to the amount of cash available to where if you sweep this event, you get almost $6 million, then great. And if the tour wasn't having to come out of pocket to just cobble together events to where it financially stresses the tour into the next season, then yes. But I don't know that I can sit here and obviously I'm with you on all of the things, but also is the WTA's responsibility to take on that financial stress because other markets aren't stepping up to the plate at the same scale financially. I don't know that I can sit here and say that. Should Sabalenka be making less, because another market isn't stepping up to the plate financially? And I'm so glad you said what you said, John, because do not base the success of an event based on who is there. 100 is startling, right? But if it was sold 80% through, then it's great. But it's less, person in the seat is great for atmosphere. It's great for the players because you want to feel that buzz. You want to feel like it's an important event. Joe Blow sitting in the seats is less relevant financially than Joe Blow's ever been at a sporting event.
I will say this, it does affect the way I watch sporting events like that. Like Francis Ngannou just fought there, and watching it, it sounded very hollow. The dude's 6'5", knocking out a dude that's 6'8", and it sounded very unimpressive, even though it was extremely impressive. And watching matches this week, like even for somebody watching on TV, the lack of fan interaction and swell and all that stuff, it feels weird. And so if we can say the TV thing, but I think it kind of diminishes the TV experience for the average fan. Like watching World Series baseball is much different from a viewership standpoint because of the fans than watching the Cincinnati Reds play the Pirates in the middle of June.
Yes, agree with all that. And it's not as if we came from two venues in two cities that were slammed, packed full of people. Cancun was not, and it was a makeshift 3,000 person stadium. It wasn't even like a thing. Dallas was awkward. So it's not as if we have a choice between this or that. If we had a choice between this or that, John, then I would be fully in on a nuanced discussion. That was, that we could level up and, maybe intelligently represent, a side versus this side. But we're going from no attendance, no money to no attendance, lots of money for the players that have busted their asses for the year.
Yeah.
So I'm not sitting here going, it's a great situation. I'm going, I think the players deserve a payoff. I'm happy for them to get that payoff. And also it looks like a dumpster fire on TV.
Did you guys see, supply and demand doing its thing? Again, the Athletic is my source on this, but apparently you can get a ticket for $8.66, which that's $1.34 less than my niece's clarinet recital. That's half the price of a movie. So if you happen to have means, there's a steal. You want to watch Coco play? Looks like $8.66 is your admission price. I mean, in theory, if you do the math, in theory, there may be more ticket revenue from one single U.S. Open final ticket than an entire session. No, than an entire session. Entire session.
Totally. Yes. And dude, you're paying 3/4 of a honeydew for a ticket.
Yeah.
I mean, it's going to cost me more to get a Moana 2 popcorn bucket.
I paid more for a Venom popcorn bucket yesterday with the old Hankster. He was smoking caramel corn. It was a whole thing. We'll see. Hopefully it gains a little traction. But I will say that people who are like, we're going to inspire and we're going to do all this, well, no. I mean, this is a multi-year contract. If this is like this in a couple of years, then that argument rings a little bit hollower. We're going to kind of have to put up and start inspiring. I mean, if that's the main argument.
The venue looks cool. The venue looks really, really beautiful. Yeah. I mean, we just had guys over there for my other company doing stuff. And the city's really fun. They said the city's a lot of fun. They were shooting all around. They're out in the desert. So, I mean, it's an attractive place to visit, visually.
JW, what a mogul. We're amongst I was there with my other company.
Yeah.
Look at this guy.
Yeah.
Oh,
Look at this mogul.
Look at us, just a media mogul over there.
God, look at you. Look at you. Unbelievable. I was in Riyadh.
I didn't get to go. I had to do a podcast.
Yeah. Yeah. Why would you go to Riyadh when you could do a podcast in a gym?
Yeah, in a gym.
I do want to spend a little bit of time on the actual participants in the WTA Finals. Props to Rybakina for getting back out there. I think the big news story of the week, even going in, was her picking up Goran Ivanisevic as a coach. Not on my radar, right? I think we kind of silo. This guy's a coach for men. He has been a coach for men. Cilic, Djokovic. He hasn't gone to the women's side yet. I think it's great that he did. But it seems like we kind of trade around the same coaches and they go in a circle on the WTA Tour a little bit. Wasn't on my radar. I was surprised by it. But also the more I thought about it, I'm going, oh, this is a great hire. This is potentially a great hire, right? They both are super tall. They both hit spots. They both have massive serves. The two players that Goran has worked with, Cilic and Novak, hit hard flat through the court, right? That is a match for Rybakina as well. They both won Wimbledon. They're both good on the same surfaces. And most importantly, the credibility that Goran brings to the camp, and also the levity that he might bring, right? The guy has a personality, completely has a personality where he's always in on the joke, right? And coming off of this borderline toxic relationship of Rybakina's with her last coach, the more I thought about it, the more I like this hire. Why am I wrong, JW?
Oh, man. Can't we argue about something besides supply and demand? No, I think you're totally right. I think part of this is about the tennis. Here are two players. They both won Wimbledon. Goran, how do you build? The serve is a great weapon, but how do you build around that? And I think you're right. I think this is probably, and I don't know. I mean, this is really a player who is cloaked and shrouded in mystery. Rybakina, we've talked about it before. I mean, this is not someone who is particularly candid, nor does she have to be. But I think it's safe to assume this is clearly, if it's about tennis, it's also about temperament. And you said it. This is someone who could use a little more levity and joy, and she gets it with Goran. And I talked to him a fair amount. I didn't cover him necessarily, but I got to know him a bit through the Novak camp. And he's a real, he's sort of a jokester, and he's funny, and he's good company. But he also really knows tennis. I was really impressed with him. He's sort of portrayed, at least, he predated me a little bit, but it always seemed like the goofy guy who's kind of the butt of his own joke and couldn't get out of his own way, and sort of the tennis clown who sits in the back row. And then you talk to him as a coach, and he's really insightful and perceptive, but then finishes the anecdote with a funny story. I mean, it's a real sort of, it's a good combination, I think. And I think in this case in particular, the more laughs, the better, because that's not something you necessarily see with Rybakina, who's really still in the prime of her career. And there's a lot of, she hadn't played a match since the US Open. She's had these blocks. We've had this sort of, these mystery illnesses. There's a lot of speculation that she doesn't tend to confirm, but let's not forget, this is a player who's come within a couple points of winning multiple majors at this point, who's only 23, 24 years old. There's a lot of upside here. And I think this could really be a combo to watch in 2025.
Yeah. And frankly, if you're someone who has the track record, both as a player and a coach as Goran, you want someone who is a proven star. And also you feel like there's a lot of runway. Does he look at Rybakina and say, hey, this is someone who can rip off 2, 3, 4 slams? Sure. Under the right circumstances, if we do good work and we hit a certain moment in time, sure. There's no one that says she's not one of the top 2 or 3 contenders at any slam outside of Roland Garros, probably. So I like this. I would have never thought of it. It was not on my radar. It came out and I was kind of almost a little like happily stunned. But I think it's great. Qinwen Zheng is still playing well. Still has a matchup problem with Sabalenka. Loses her first match there to her, and the swing is a little big on the forehand. And Sabalenka just peppers it, goes through it. Zhang is better than everyone on earth, maybe at this moment, except for Sabalenka over the last 6 weeks. It is a bit of a matchup problem. Props for Swiatek for coming back post-US Open. I gave her props on another show for saying, a lot of people say, I'm exhausted, the tour is too long, and then they sign up for 4 more exhibitions. She's actually said, I'm burnt out. This is too much. I need to make a change, yada, yada, yada. Actually did it. Hasn't played since losing to Pegula in the quarters of the US Open. Came back, got through her first match. Just an uber professional. Paolini is a great story this year. I mean, just going from never having been past the second round of a slam to now being 4 in the world is just awesome. And she does it with a smile on her face. Fantastic. I think Coco has actually looked great post-US Open. I almost feel like she needed to get through that tournament and that title defense to kind of open up a little bit. And one thing I have noticed, JW, the serve looks way better. And I know she double faulted some, and I think it was in Wuhan, but the grip is better, right? So if I can do it on my iPhone and you can see it all, it's kind of been, as the year's gone on, she's kind of opened it at the start. It's more straight on. And what I'm seeing is that you're not getting the double faults where one is, 3 feet below the net line and the next one is 5 feet long. The variance in misses is way less. And so credit to Matt Daly, who I don't think anyone had on their bingo card, and probably wrongfully so, because he's done, he's been a good coach, as having this job permanently. It went to, okay, Matt Daly, and who's she going to hire past that? He's making a hell of a case just to let's let it ride into 2025. Why do we need a celebrity coach? She's made a little bit of a grip change on her serve. I think it looks way better. I think as the year progressed, she kind of started turning the crank over and over and over a little bit more and maybe got herself into a bit of a bad habit. So credit for Daly for realizing that and switching it. Forehand looks like she's getting the racket back and prepared a little bit more often, so she doesn't have to do as much work late in the swing and play catch up. And that's it. I mean, I think it's just a great showcase, and you just wish more people were in attendance and giving the energy credit that these women deserve.
Go back to Coco for a second, because, people like me can look at the stats and see that the double faults actually are looking a lot better than they did when she lost in the US Open, but we don't necessarily see the grip change. I mean, how impressed should we be by the fact that instead of taking off 3-4 months to really address these technical issues, she's kind of, what's the cliche? She's like building the plane while she's flying it, but she seems to be addressing some of these technical issues while she's playing a full schedule. That, from afar, to me, that's impressive and professional and commendable.
Yeah, well, I think it has something to do. I mean, she said after she lost to Navarro and hit, I don't know, it was 20-ish doubles, and the third set was pretty painful watching. I could go out right now on the practice court and do 30 of them in a row. So I almost feel like you have to stress test it in actual matches if you're Coco. Because at some point, I think it became a mental thing even more than the physical improvements that could have been available. And a lot of times, like we say, oh, you got to reconstruct everything. You don't always have to do that. Like if all of a sudden they make this switch on the grip and you're feeling good after 3 or 4 days, and you go stress test it and it's way better, that's a shot of confidence. Like immediately, like it held up 2, 3, 4 matches, right? You can almost lie to yourself that this fixes everything. And I think it's fixed a lot. Like even the variance in misses is a huge tell with serve, whether it's technical flaw, mental flaw, her hitting the top of the racket and it barely clearing the ground before it hits the net. And then the next one's 6 feet long. That is a problem. That's one where I'm watching, I'm going, oh, there's no control. We're just dealing in hope at this point. Whereas even yesterday against Jess, she had a couple doubles, but it was like an aggressive miss where she missed it a foot long, right? There weren't the ones that were just crawling up the net, hoping to fall into a box somewhere. So even the misses, she could go out and serve 7 doubles in the next match, but there's the way you miss is a big mental tell sometimes. And from where I sit, we're dummy on a couch, it's obvious even with the way she sets up. Like, do you remember the way that actually we talked about Goran kind of opened the racket face when so Coco was almost over there, right? Like when she was in the setup, and now she's a lot more straight on, almost like a Pete, where he would almost point at you. But the rack, you didn't. His palm wasn't parallel with the ground. So immediately I go, oh, okay, that's different. That's a different look on the serve. And I think she had kind of tweaked it. And sometimes you develop bad habits and you don't even know how. It's just a little bit at a time, and then all of a sudden it's a real problem. I feel like that's what I think happened this year with Coco. And I didn't have I don't have firsthand knowledge of this because I didn't talk to her much about it post Australian Open this year, but it looks great. It looks a lot better. And I think she is the test case for really, really working hard. And to your point, JW, bearing down during this kind of dead part of the year where maybe the eyeballs are in different places in the sports universe, and has really, really done a great job of correcting. And credit to Matt Daly for going into that situation post Brad Gilbert. It's hard to follow like an iconic coach, make an adjustment, have it work, and just kind of keep your head down and do the work. So props to that whole team. Producer Mike, what the hell else, man? You know what? There was a new movie announced. There was a new tennis movie announced. Yeah, The Journeyman. Was it starring Dev Patel? Dev Patel, yeah. Dev Patel. And what? It's about match fixing? Yeah, so basically it's about a tennis pro who's down on his luck and has to resort to the nasty world of match fixing to make ends meet. It's going to be a thriller. A thriller? Tennis, yeah. Literally a tennis crime thriller. Yeah. I like this moment for tennis. I think this is exciting. Is it's just tennis crime thriller. You want a hot take here? I mean, first of all, this film, it's Scott Franklin, who's a partner of Darren Aronofsky. I mean, this is legit. Mike, you want a hot take real quick? Give it. I'll always say yes to a hot take. One of this sport's great assets that sometimes is capitalized and monetized, sometimes it's not, is how international it is. It's two genders, it flies. If you take a meeting with Netflix, one of the first things they say is there an audience for this in India? Well, you know what? Tennis has an audience in India. We don't have the big three. We don't have Serena. We don't have these four pillars and these four crutches, but tennis is sort of found its place into a different kind of market. And this is something that I think both tours should really lead into. That Hollywood has figured out that tennis has a lot of virtue and a lot of international assets it can tap into. If I'm the ATP or the WTA or even an individual player, I'm looking at this very positively. But tennis is sort of transitioning from a queen and three kings into a different kind of global marketplace. Yeah, we have a big following in India. Yeah, big shout out. Your other company or this one? No, just us. Just us. Jeez, I didn't know if you were talking about. Well, my other company. Yeah, just me. Producer mogul. I'm gonna have to change it. We should get some T-shirts made. Listen, tennis it's just cool right now. Like it really is. I mean, you just have it's just the COVID bump with participation, and now it's mainstream. I don't know, like India's going crazy. I guarantee you put the WTA Finals in India, there'd be some people there. I know that for a fact. Now we just got to connect the dots with the money. Right. The money. No $8.66. No, we you know what I liked? As long as we're doing catch all day, and we're gearing up towards the men's final. We're in this is the dog days of the tennis calendar. You know what I really like about Paris? Remember, who's old enough to remember when ATP 1000 events were 1 week and you had all of this compressed action? It kind of works, doesn't it? It's just that just in no uncertain terms, and this is going to be the headline from an hour show. The 2 week 1000s are so stupid. They're so stupid. They're so dumb. It's the worst. I hate it. I feel like more people got injured because you can't do the work on off weeks to build your body up physically. If you're playing every other day, you can't go and do the intense work. The players are saying this. The feedback has been shit. Maybe you shouldn't have committed the calendar to a long-term vision of something that is not proven. It sucks. And Paris was great. To your point, we finished in a week. It was fantastic, right? All we're trying to do is create some elbow room for the schedule. And what do? Let's make all the Masters 1000s 2 weeks. Oh, that'll help the calendar. I still don't get why, you have the U.S. Open and then all this break until the finals. I just don't get it. Oh, you mean playing the Paris Masters and then having a 250 in between? They don't give it. I'm just telling you, actions speak louder than words. There are no shits given about length of schedule. People clutch their pearls and say, fuck it, we're going to add more weeks. That's what happens. And that is why they're like, a union would be great if executed in a proper way. It would be great.
You'll be happy to know that the ATP board meeting has told us the 10th 1,000 event that I think everyone rightly assumes is going to Saudi Arabia has been approved and is on pace for 2027.
Great,
so,
can't wait. We're literally, you get to go home for Christmas. That's it.
Maybe not even that.
Maybe not even that. God, we finish on a downer.
We'll leave it to Netflix to save the sport.
Just don't make 1,000s 12 days. You don't need 12 days to play 6 rounds of 2 out of 3 tennis. You just don't.
Well, it's a lot to like consume. Like I think the NBA playoffs being as long as they are, sometimes I get lost. I'm like, they're still playing, you know? I mean, I just think it's like, get in, get the hype train going, get out. Like the attention span's like shorter and they're making everything longer. Doesn't make sense.
Yeah. Happy election day to all of you.
Good God.
Skipping work. This has been a fun year for us. Started in February. A lot of good talk. Looking forward to the rest of this year. I'll tell you one thing. We're not going back. I'll tell you that. We're going to keep continuing with this podcast, right?
Yes, sir.
I agree. This is Served. I'm Andy Roddick. JW, producer Mike, Techie Sean. Happy voting day.